Okay, great. So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to our fourth Knowledge Lab with St. Joseph Communications. I am going to introduce now Councillor Jennifer McKelvey, who you've all met before, to provide us with the land acknowledgement and the welcome for this evening's Knowledge Lab.
Thank you, Daniela. The City of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The city also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Welcome everyone to the fourth and final Knowledge Lab. It's been quite the journey, I'm sure, for all of you. And it's really hard to believe that we're coming to the end of the mentorship program very soon. I'm really looking forward to hearing how the projects have grown from the start of this process through the pitch competition, which will be coming up soon. And I want to thank Toronto Life, St. Joseph's Communications, and Jason, Chantal, Dustin, and Irene for organizing today's event, along with today's guests, Erin, Alex, and Fatima. I'll turn things over now to Jason Maghanoy, Head of Business Development at St. Joseph Communication, to get us started. And I'm sure I'm going to learn something just like all the mentees that are participating today. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, and welcome. Thank you so much for everyone for joining today. So for this, I'm going to be doing a very simple presentation right off the top. It's going to be focusing on the basics for a pitch. I take it the pitch that you're all going to be doing is going to be over Zoom. So some of the things that we're going to be doing are just some of the basics that are going to be really helpful as you enter the pitch process. And then we're going to transition into a thought leadership panel. And it's going to be basically a thought leadership panel welcoming three amazing people who can offer outstanding insights, especially in the sectors and the work that you're in. We're going to be welcoming Alex Gill, who is one of the leads at the Social Venture Zone at Ryerson, as well as Erin Bury, the co-founder of Willful, and Fatima Zaidi, who is the founder of Quill. So it's going to be a great thought leadership panel. But to start off, let's jump right into my presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. So please it's the usual Zoom thing. I'm going to say, can you see my screen after I share it? So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Amazing. So this is the way that I've sort of wanted to position this is I really wanted to make it as simple as possible. So these are just really great basics when it comes to pitching. So there are 6 things, and we're going to start with number 1. Number 1 is introduce yourself. The amount of times I've been at a pitch competition where someone goes up there and doesn't even say who they are, that actually is too bad. And it actually is a huge opportunity for you when you begin your pitch. So number 1 is introduce yourself. You'll be surprised how many people don't do this. And in terms of how you introduce yourself, there's a certain way to do it. So the way that you do it is basically like this. Your personal story will set your core competence and expertise. So basically your personal story and your introduction will make you the expert in the room and will make you the expert in basically the vertical you're hoping to be a leader in. So this is me. This is my introduction, and I'm going to just do it right now for you. You know, in terms of business and media, I'm the head of business development at one of the largest media companies in Canada. I'm a playwright. I was a finalist at Juilliard for the Playwriting Fellowship. And right now I'm a playwright in residence at Alberta Theatre Project. I'm super active in the city building space. So I'm part of the TELUS Community Board. I'm a mentor at the university. I'm a mentor at the Social Venture Zone at Ryerson. I'm an advisor for the University Health Network, and I'm on the board of the Luminato Festival here in Toronto. What unifies all of my work? Storytelling. What I do with my work is I try to add value in terms of a brand story, a strategy as a story. And the one thing that unifies everything that I do is the ability to tell compelling brand stories. And that's one of the main ways that I add value in terms of the work that I do with clients and the work that I do with partners. I help you tell an amazing story. and I build engagement by helping you tell that story. So at the top, most important thing, introduce yourself. And then when you introduce yourself and your expertise. The second thing that's really, really important when it comes to a pitch is, why do you exist? So the next thing you should definitely answer is, why does your company exist? And what problem are you trying to solve? So obviously you want to hit those 2 points. They're super important. And the way that you can hit those 2 points is actually really simple. And the way that you would hit them is like this. Demonstrate the problem and the market fit for your business with a personal anecdote at the top. And it's usually the moment that you came up with the idea for your business. So I'm going to give you an example of this. I'm going to talk about my fake wedding business. So this is my fake wedding business. Millennials are the largest market segment right now. I'm a millennial. And like all other millennials, I'm entering really important milestones in my life. And one of the things that I'm noticing as you enter the milestones in your life is that we're a different set than our parents. We actually have less money than our parents as we're sort of building our lives and building our careers. So my wife and I really wanted to get married, and we really wanted to redefine what that tradition could mean for us. We wanted a special wedding. We wanted something that was intimate and out of the box. And from there, M2 was born. M2 is a marketplace of progressive vendors that allow you to build the micro wedding of your dreams. And this is our wedding. We got married in front of 12 people. We got married in the studio of an artist in our favorite neighborhood in Toronto. And we got married for $750, thanks to the M2 marketplace. So I showed the problem. I solved the problem with my business, and I was the case study. You're probably going to be your business's first customer. So it's a really nice and simple way to basically show the problem, solve the problem, and be the case study. And that business isn't real. That's a made up business, but that's an example of how the anecdote can be effective on this point. The third thing is, what is your product in one line? And I think this is something that's going to be really important. You're probably hearing a lot of things about what's your elevator pitch. And the elevator pitch is like, what can you say to someone in 15 seconds if you're with them in the elevator and you want them to be interested in your business? In this case, it's, what is your product in one line? And a really good example of that would be, this is Uber. Uber is a technology platform. Our smartphone apps connect driver partners and riders. We are a safe and affordable urban mobility solution. So in the end, it's just a very simple way to position what your product is or what your business is. And it's a really simple way to, at the same time, indicate what problem you're trying to solve with your business. So in terms of where we're at right now, we have introduce yourself. So make sure that you introduce yourself and make sure that you position yourself as the expert and position yourself in your core competence. The next piece is, why do you exist? Why do you exist? And what problem are you trying to solve? And positioning that as an anecdote. That is the eureka moment, that when you came up with the business, and basically showcase what the problem is, how you solved it, and how you're the best case study. And then how do you say what your business is in one line? So those are really important for your pitch. Something else that's really important for your pitch is, what makes you unique? And this is a really important part of any pitch. It's you say, this is my value proposition. We are X. And at the same time, you give a competitive landscape analysis. So what makes you unique? And while you're doing that, try to kill your competitors at the same time. So it's a really good way for you to showcase your value prop, differentiate yourself in the market because you know who your competitors are, and then kill them at the same time. So and I'm using the strong word kill, but differentiate yourself in a positive way from them at the same time. So what could this look like? Well, here's an example. This is Uber versus Lyft. Unlike X, so in this case, unlike a competitor of yours, unlike X, we aren't the worst ever, and we actually are sustainable and the friendliest people ever. So that's an example of just a way that you can position your value proposition and defeat your competitors at the same time. If you look at this diagram, it's really super simple. What is Uber saying about themselves versus Lyft? We're a better, more luxurious experience. We have more cars. We're older, and we're just overall a more mature business. So in the end, it's just a really easy way to talk about your value prop, position yourself in the marketplace or in the landscape, and then basically showcase what differentiates you and what helps you beat your competitors. Something else that you should throw into your pitch as you're going along is who has bought in. And what this is who do you currently work with? So we start with, right at the top, introduce myself. Here's our core competence, and here's why I am the expert. Here is the product, and here's the problem we're trying to solve. Here is the eureka moment, which showcases why we even created this business. Here's the problem, here's how we solved it, here's how we're the case study. And then here is our value proposition in this landscape. Here's how we're different and unique, and here's how we're better. And then at the end, you say, who agrees? Who agrees with all the things that I just said? And one of the amazing things about having this partner slide is that it's very impactful, and it looks like this. Your partners give you credibility. So these are my clients. So if I were to say, hey, I'm moving the needle for Uber, Google, Oliver and Bonacini, Salesforce, and TELUS, I can probably move the needle for you too. So that is something that you end with. You show who has already bought in, who are your stakeholders, and that right away gives you extra credibility in terms of how you're positioning your pitch. So going right back to the top, introduce yourself and position yourself as the expert and position what your core competence is, number one. Number two, why do you exist? So why do you exist, and what kind of problem are you trying to solve with your business/product? The third thing is present us the eureka moment. Show us with a really great personal anecdote how you came up with the business. So showcase the problem you're trying to solve, how you solved it, and then showcase why you are probably the best case study for the business and for the potential customer. The next phase is showcase what makes you unique. Do a competitive landscape analysis at the same time and use your value proposition to beat your competitors. And then showcase who agrees with that point of view. Showcase who has already come on board to support you in your work, and use your partners and leverage the fact that they've already bought in to give your overall pitch and your business and your product extra credibility. So now, once you have this really super amazing pitch, which is super simple, you can do it in 15 minutes, which is basically what I did now. You're gonna have a really super simple, great pitch that you can do in 15 minutes. Now, the question is, who do you talk to? How do you build the right relationship capital? How do you get in front of the right people? What are the next steps to take your pitch and take it on the road and test? So that is now where we're going to jump in to the thought leadership panel. But first, I'll answer some questions. And then we're going to jump into the thought leadership panel with Alex, Erin, and Fatima. And they are going to be showcasing all the different ways that they've taken some of these best practices and applied them in their work. They're going to showcase some of the ways that you can build really wonderful and meaningful relationships. And they're going to showcase all of the great ways that you can go about building your business. So does anyone have any questions before we welcome the thought leader panels? We have about 10 minutes. So please turn on your cameras and ask away.
Hi there, my name is Hillary. Sorry, I'm having trouble turning on my camera. I'm blind.
Oh, no worries.
It'll be a bit of a disaster. I'll make sure to have it on for the pitch, but I was wondering what value you place on creating a PowerPoint.
Yeah, so I think in the end, like it just entirely depends in the situation. I mean, one of the things you're probably going to hear when we do our thought leadership panel is there's lots of different scenarios in which you'll be pitching your business. So if you're, for example, having a coffee with someone, you're probably not going to be able to pull out a PowerPoint. You'll just need to make sure that you have your 15-minute elevator pitch super laid out and clear in a very conversational setting. I find PowerPoints to be very effective, especially if you're going to be doing Zoom presentations. PowerPoints are actually quite great. And the good thing about them is that you can send them. You can send them to people. So it's a really good way for you to make sure all of the messaging in your pitch is super disciplined. And if you pass it on to someone, would you be happy if they passed that PowerPoint on to 80 people? So as long as you're happy with that and it's a good reflection of what your product and your business is, absolutely do it.
Great, thank you.
Hi there. My name is Jane G from Spring Bay Studio. I have a question there. What if, how do you handle the situation where your competitive landscape is more kind of a one industry? For example, like we're on the crossroad of kind of a multiple industries, like, the ed tech, environmental, social, environmental and social sector. So like when we look at the competitive landscape, that probably will have more than one competitors, but with the setting of the competitive, the elevator pitch or things like that. And I always feel kind of like nervous, how should we choose the right competitors to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that's really important is if you intersect with a lot of sectors, one way to make it as easy as possible for yourself is you can just basically say, no one is like us. That's the easiest way to do it. It's like if you're intersecting with a lot of different sectors, you can basically say, we intersect with a lot of different sectors, but in the end, we are unique and there are no other businesses like us out there. And right off the bat, it's like, okay, then you can talk about yourself any way that you like. It's a nice little white space. So that's something that I would recommend. It's always interesting though when it comes to competitors, because it's like another interesting thing you can do when you're talking about competitors is you can also like throw a curveball. Like if you were to go and you were thinking about a business like say Slack, you go Slack, who is your competitor? The obvious competitor of Slack would be Microsoft Teams, but they don't consider themselves a competitor. Whenever they do their pitches, they say, we love Teams. Even though Teams is trying to blow them up and kill them every day. It's like, no, we love Teams. Actually, we integrate with Teams. So one of the ways they basically beat their competitor is they basically said, we're not competitors. So there's lots of different ways. In the end, it comes right back to your value proposition. What makes you super unique? And then basically figuring out how you want to occupy that landscape. Do you want to position it in a way that you're beating everyone? Or do you want to say we complement? Or do you want to say they're not competitors? It's entirely up to you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Anne. Thank you so much for your presentation today. I had a question about also pitch decks as well. So from your presentation, I think it's quite compelling, like the very simplistic delivery of our ideas that are very sort of a really good way to present information. However, I think at the same time, I struggle personally with trying to be simple, but also feeling I've substantiated enough about my business idea. So I was wondering if you had some insight on how to manage that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. It literally comes down to the more you probably notice this in basically everything in our lives. The simpler we get, sometimes the more compelling it kind of becomes. And that's sort of one of the things that I always try to showcase here. It's simple in terms of showcasing as simply as possible what it is. But then if the problem you're trying to solve is complex, embrace the complexity of the problem. Like, hey, listen, this is a really complex problem. This is what the problem is. This is how our business solves it. So basically what I'm just saying is it is simple, but in the end, if there are complexities, just embrace them and go with it. But for me, it's always one of the things that I always try to find. The reason why I think simplicity is so important is because whenever you're presenting something to someone, regardless of who it is, if it's a mentor, if it's an investor, et cetera, they're building the value proposition for themselves in their mind, right? So the simpler you make the construction of the ideas or the components of your business, the easier it is for them to put it together in their heads. And the simpler it is, there's less chance they'll put something together in their heads that's not right. And that's one of the reasons why I think simplicity is a really important part of how we pitch.
All right, thank you very much.
No problem.
Hi there, I'm Erica Reyes. Thank you for your presentation, and hi to everyone. You are a great storyteller. You were able to capture our attention with a very simple story, and you managed to make us follow your story from the beginning to the end, and we wanted to learn more about it. I think the first part, it is just this, like, simplifying the story, but also the way you deliver the story. So if you can give us some advices on, and this is maybe much more about public speaking, link with the simplifying the story.
Yeah.
Some advices that you can give us.
Yeah, and I think you actually gave the advice. The advice is beginning, middle, and end. That is the most important thing in any type of story. The stories that end up derailing and doing so poorly is that there's no beginning, middle, or end. So in this story, in the fake story that I told, even though that actually is my wife, that wasn't how we got married. But in the fake story that I told, there's a beginning, we want to get married, and there was an end, we did. So that's basically it. So just map your way to, and the thing is, usually when you get to the ending, the end and the case study is, that's when your product or your business came in to save the day. You know what I mean? So in the end, you have this really simple story, beginning, middle, and end, and the hero of the story is your business. And then it's really easy to get that rolling, right? So, and I think in terms of public speaking, so here's an example, like, especially if you're on Zoom, like one of the things that works really, really well on Zoom is, because if you're going to be doing a lot of the pitching over Zoom, like clarity is so important. So just simplicity in terms of language, like visual aids are super important when it comes to Zoom as well. So in the end, it's just, especially on a platform like this, where you're never quite sure where someone is in terms of their attention, just making sure that you have as much sort of simplicity, as many aids as you need to make it as successful as possible. But yeah, that's sort of how you would position the story: beginning, middle, and end. You nailed it.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Well, that's all for me.
So we have time for one more question. We're waiting for one of our speakers to be joining us, but we have time for two more questions. So hello, Jessica.
Hi, Jason. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your presentation. My question is in regards to, as a young, let's say, super newborn company, how would you suggest supplementing that credibility aspect of the presentation and pitch?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, when it comes to really new companies, say, for example, you don't have that many stakeholders yet on board, or you don't have that many partners, that's fine. What ends up happening, though, is then you sort of front load what I like to see sometimes is if it's a really new company or a new concept, part of the challenge is going to be it's a new concept. I'm not quite going to understand how it functions in the real world. So a really good thing to do is if you don't have that at the end in terms of stakeholders, go to the front of the presentation and say, here are 3 or 4 or 5 really amazing case studies / integrations of how this business functions in the real world. And that actually creates not only, it creates strength, it creates like, oh, actually, this concept is actually quite simple and turnkey and it works really well. And I'm starting to basically envision how it works in the real world. And then people can start envisioning how they can participate once they start seeing that. So that's sort of something that I think is really good for a new business. Try to have as many use studies or user studies as possible. And that'll be helpful for you to sort of build credibility for the concept.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, I guess, would it be helpful to show for the case study aspect, a success story, like mild story, and then a failure? Or would you suggest going straight into successes?
And that's funny. When it comes to failures, it's so interesting because I would always, like, there's always that really interesting bit where you'd want to position your failures as you've already learned from them.
Mm.
Like, hey, listen, when we launched this, we discovered that the marketplace didn't quite work the way it was built. And we learned from that. And what we did was we improved it and turned it into X, and it's way better now. So just as long as you position your failure as the learning that helped you improve your product exponentially, then that's a really good way to take some of the failures and turn them into positives in the pitch.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. So I think we have time for one more question before we open it up to our thought leaders who are going to be joining us very, very shortly.
Hi, Jason. I had a question.
Yes.
Hi. So how would we go about presenting financials? I know we have to make a financial statement, but how can we go about that? Maybe in a simplistic form, or how in depth can we go into it? What are your suggestions on that?
Yeah, that's actually the perfect question to ask our panel of experts. That's something that I'm not quite sure. Every time I've been involved as part of a jury on a pitch competition, I've never seen financials when I've been on a jury. So we can definitely ask that question to the thought leaders who are going to be joining us. I think they'll have some really good insights on how you can go about that.
Awesome. Sure. Thank you so much.
Amazing. So it looks like they are here. So I'd like to welcome Alex, Fatima, and Erin.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jason. It's great to see everyone's friendly faces virtually during these strange times.
Nice to see you. And Erin is not here yet, so we will wait 1 minute for her. But as we're waiting for Erin to join us, I'd love to start off with welcoming you all to the group. Thank you so much for joining us. It definitely means a lot. And I'd love to do, as a quick starting point, some introductions. Tell us who you are, and let's start with Fatima.
Well, I'm Fatima Zaidi. I'm the founder and CEO of Quill, which is the world's first marketplace and now full service production agency for podcasters. I'm also the founder of the Listen In conference. I've been involved with Toronto Life for a few years now. Jason and I go way back, and so really thrilled to be here to share any of my knowledge and expertise on all things related to tech and entrepreneurship. As you can see, I've got my podcasting equipment ready to go and fully repping the Quill brand here today. So if you want to ever chat podcast, I'm your person.
Hello, Alex.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Fatima. I'm Alex. I'm the director of the social venture incubator at Ryerson called the Social Venture Zone. We incubate 35 or so social startups. We help dozens more with ideation throughout the year. I'm a social entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I've done 6 social startups and scale-ups. And yeah, I do a lot of work internationally and here with entrepreneurs, and I hear a lot of pitches. So I'm really looking forward to sharing what I can today.
Amazing. And can you tell us a bit more about the social venture zone at Ryerson? Because I think that that's actually a place that you're probably going to be seeing some of these businesses coming your way very, very soon.
Fantastic. We always love to get pitches. We're an incubator that's open to the community, to students, and to alumni. So you don't have to be a Ryerson student. In fact, about a third of the ventures we have are people from the broader community. We take social venture pitches, and we define social venture as something that has a core social problem at the heart of what the venture is trying to do. So there are often firms that want to do something that's kind of peripherally or incidentally good. We want to make a lot of money and donate money to charity. That's awesome. Really recommend that. That's not the kind of pitch we're looking for. We're looking for ventures that are trying to fix a core social problem. The core focus of the venture is about making the world a better place by addressing a core social issue.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're still waiting for Erin. So while we wait for Erin, we'll just jump right in and we'll get started. And I think we'll start with you, Alex. And I think that, going back to what we were saying, what are some evergreen best practices that you can share when it comes to building relationship capital and finding partners, funders for a new business venture?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I find when people are talking about partnerships, often they're listening to a little too much Gary Vee or a little too much TikTok. And not thinking, they're not thinking about the human dimension, right? Funding and relationships follow trust. Trust follows getting to know somebody. So often the tests that we would apply to, would this person pick me up at the airport, apply to, do I want to open my network up to this person and maybe connect them to money or a potential partner? So I find when people are hyper-focused, where they say, I am only looking for people who look like this, and I see them in networking things all the time. It's like the radar is on all the time. Oh, Jason, you can't help me. Oh, wait, you can help me. You need to be human in your interaction with people. And that's very much, I've never gone wrong, and I've never seen an entrepreneur go wrong by actually being genuinely interested in what people are doing. You need to open yourself up to serendipity. Like I go to the SOCAP conference in San Francisco every year before COVID. And that's like the big gathering of social capital investors from all over the world. I have yet to do one deal at SOCAP, but it doesn't matter. The people you meet in that environment build relationships that you can then pursue throughout the rest of the year. But I see people in meetings like that all the time. They're like heat-seeking missiles. You can help me. You can't. I'm going to dismiss you. You can help somebody like that? Probably not. So I'd say genuine human interest and contact breeds trust. Trust breeds a good relationship.
I think just to echo on what Alex was saying, I would also add that I think it's really important for those who are raising capital to also remember that just as much as you need capital, investors need deal flow. And so you need to be doing your due diligence and research when it comes to who you're getting in front of and giving your time to. I can't stress this enough as someone, a female founder and also a person of color. I think that oftentimes we can get boxed into one of two categories, one where we're part of some minimal charity diversity quota fund, or we don't fall into the box of what constitutes as a typical entrepreneur. And so I've gotten, hyper vigilant, and actually with Quill, where we've decided to bootstrap because we can. But in general, in the past, when I've, spoken to a lot of investors, I want to know, how many female partners do you have at your cap table? What's your history of investing in female-led companies? And if, you aren't able to check those boxes for me, then I'm probably not going to waste my time and resources in pitching my company to you either. So I think it's a two-way street, and you really want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence. And there's so many resources out there now that you can tap into. Crunchbase is one of my favorite public resources that you can tap into really quickly to find those bite-sized nuggets of information. I think Erin's actually joined, so she's going to have a lot to say on this topic. I'll throw it over to her to do her intro as well.
Thank you.
Sorry for starting without you, Erin.
Sorry, Erin. How are you?
All good. I thought I was on time, but I guess I was behind the 8 ball. Sorry, everyone.
How are you?
It's Taco Tuesday, so I was scarfing down some tacos before I joined.
How are you? And we'd love for you to introduce yourself to the group today.
Yeah, so I'm Erin Bury. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Willful. We're a Toronto-based online estate planning platform that helps people create their will and power of attorney documents easily online. I founded the company with my husband, Kevin. So that's a fun dynamic, especially during quarantine. And we're about 15 people now, based in Toronto, but we also just hired our first remote employee in Alberta. And I know we're on the topic of fundraising, I believe. We've raised it all. We've raised friends and family funding. We've had funding from Clearbank, government grants, angel groups, individual angels, accelerators, and most recently, a seed round of venture capital financing in May 2020. So I am definitely your gal if you have questions about any type of fundraising.
That is amazing. And that's actually a perfect segue into my question to you, which is congratulations on the success of Willful. And when you joined Willful full-time about a year after your husband launched it, what were the top 5 things you did when you joined that helped set you up for success?
It's a great question. And yes, full credit goes to, I was running a marketing agency in Toronto at that time. So he quit his job, started working on it full time, and then somehow roped me into joining full time. But obviously I've become very passionate about it as well. I think the big things for me were I went from running an agency to a product company. And so that's a big shift in mindset from tracking your time and really not raising external funding and growing slowly based on your client list to a product company, which is really all about, scaling with external funding, not tracking your time, thankfully. So the biggest things that I did when I came in were to put some foundational process in place. I'm a big believer in, I know, HR gets a bad rap on the office, but I'm a big believer in those foundational process things early on, because as you scale, those are the things that are going to break your company. So whether it's, having a really great employee handbook, and even if there's one employee, it's easier to create it when it's small and build on it over time, to your interviewing and onboarding process, to your approach to building relationships with investors, whether that's a CRM system to record those relationships or a monthly investor advisory update, and a follower update for those who may invest in the future. So putting some of those kind of foundational processes and then launching a monthly advisor investor update that also got sent out to potential investors were probably the first baseline things that I did that helped to kind of set us up for success as we grew.
Wow, I love that idea of just coming in and making sure you do all of that foundational work, because it's going to be a lot harder as you grow, and making sure that you have it in place is just so important. And this is actually a good segue into my next question. And Fatima, you touched upon this, and it's about the challenges, like when you're as a BIPOC entrepreneur. So what challenges do you encounter as a woman, a BIPOC entrepreneur, and how did you work to overcome them?
Well, I think a lot of the stats sort of speak for itself. The average deal flow or deal size for female-led companies last year was 5 million, while for male-led companies, it was 12 million. And that's more than double, of what we're seeing essentially out there right now. And I think when it really comes down to it, we inherently all have our biases. At the end of the day, we want to interact necessarily with people who we're necessarily familiar with. And I would say that when it comes to raising capital, there is that stereotypical, I would say, poster child of what a successful entrepreneur constitutes as. And anyone outside of that is well, I think we definitely would have to, it's about exposure and access and reaching those right networks and access to capital. I think that, a lot of individuals in my position have had to try to get really creative when it comes to either raising money or bootstrapping our company in a different way. And so I think the learning lesson for me during the pandemic was that you don't necessarily always need to default to raising capital. I think that we have done a really good job of profiling some incredible tech companies like Willful that have actually managed to sort of surpass all of those stats and odds and raise capital. But we're not doing enough of a job of profiling the companies that are able to bootstrap and who are able to, get creative either on the service side or, have some sort of a revenue stream that can fund their product side. And our interesting COVID story is that we actually were going the capital route and we're on term sheets with investors. And because of the pandemic, they decided to pull out last minute. And then a few months later, they came back to invest at a higher valuation. And we actually said no, because we didn't need the capital anymore. And so the learning lesson there for me was, if you are able to bootstrap and incrementally grow your business. That's always an option. And in some cases, if you are a tech product or a tech enabled company, absolutely, it makes sense to accelerate your growth by investing, but not necessarily the only option or solution out there on the market. And so I decided to go the other route to try to stay cash flow positive from day one. And that was the necessity of, I already knew how hard and challenging it would be for me to raise capital. And then the funding landscape during the pandemic made it even more difficult. So.
And this is actually so everyone who's on this call right now, they're going to be in a pitch competition. They're going to be entering this process. They're going to be pitching. So this is a question for you, Erin. You participated in the Founder Fuel Accelerator program and you pitched Willful to 1,000 people at Demo Day. So what did you learn about pitching as you prepared for that event? And how has your pitch evolved in the 2 years since then?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, congratulations to everyone in the program. It's really exciting. We had the opportunity to go through Founder Fuel in Montreal, which was really an amazing experience. And I think we went through a rigorous process of developing the story, building out the actual pitch deck, working on delivery. And I think the biggest thing I learned was to practice as much as possible and get feedback from as many people as you can, but to remember that ultimately this is your story. When you go through programs like this, you're going to speak to so many advisors, mentors, people like us who are telling you about our own experience and who know very little about your business. And that's true of pitching investors. When you're sitting with an investor, whether it's an angel investor, a friends and family investor, or a VC, they've probably thought about your problems. They've definitely only thought about estate planning and wills for 5 minutes in their whole life. They don't know nearly as much as you know. So take the advice, but take it with a grain of salt. Try to take out the common pieces of feedback, try to parse the things that are valuable to you and the things that really you're just going to keep over in this corner of your mind or dismiss as just them maybe not knowing as much about your industry. And the really important thing is to build in and address objections. We got a ton of feedback that we were direct to consumer. How are we going to scale? We're Canada only. How are we going to become a big business? We're a one-time transactions business. How are we going to build recurring revenue? We knew by the third or fourth meeting with an advisor, mentor, or investor, they were going to ask those questions. So we started building those into our pitch deck and talking to them so that we weren't trying to hide anything and we were addressing those objections. So the biggest things that we learned to sum up were practice. By the time I got on that Founder Fuel stage, you probably could have held a gun to my head and put me in any sort of stressful situation. I can still verbatim recite that pitch because they drilled it into our heads that we had to practice it until we were basically like presenting on the stage of the Oscars. And that also helped to cut down on nerves, although I was still very nervous. The virtual stage is much less overwhelming. And then to iterate a million times. You might write your pitch deck and think it's the best thing since sliced bread. But if you go in with that mentality of not being open to feedback, you're really not going to get it to a place where it's in its 10th, 15th, 20th iteration. And ours has completely changed over time as the story that we've been telling has changed. We were telling the story about a very early stage company at that point, and now we've really reframed the story to the stage of the business that we're at. So I'd also say revisit that story over time and make sure that it reflects the story that you're telling today, not the one you told 2 years ago.
Wow. That is amazing advice. And I love the idea of addressing your objections. That's so smart. And that's actually a great segue into my question for Alex, which is, so, obviously at Social Venture Zone, you see a lot of pitches. So what are you looking for in a pitch? And what are top 3 things that you can share with this group that are always a part of a successful one? I think you're on mute, Alex.
Not officially.
We needed one of those.
Not officially a Zoom call, so somebody has to say that. I was saying I really like Erin's points about knowing your story really well. The metaphor we use in the Social Venture Zone in teaching pitching is a Jenga set. I actually set up the Jenga blocks, and it's a metaphor for pitching because when you're pitching, if you can't reply to a question that somebody is going to throw at you, one of those Jenga blocks comes out, and if enough of them come out, the whole thing crashes over. So we get people in their mind thinking, I want to make sure that if I can respond to what's coming at me, those blocks aren't going to move. So it gives you a solid pitch. And the other thing is people are always concentrating on that shiny block on top of the Jenga, which is, let me tell you about this beautiful thing I'm building. that one of the biggest mistakes I see in pitching is because as entrepreneurs, we're living our solution all the time. You get up and you think about the startup. You go to bed, you think about the startup. It's there all the time. It's totally understandable that you think everybody shares your bias. They don't. So the thing I see that entrepreneurs do is they jump far too quickly into the solution. Well, we're doing this, and let me tell you about my SaaS platform that looks like this, and they're into the screenshots, and I look at the audience, and half of them are like, wait a minute, what's the need for this? What's the context for it? The ones who do really well, this is the first thing, the ones that do really well are the ones that set a context in terms of making the audience feel the problem. Let me tell you about this global market that isn't being served. Let me tell you about this pain that people have that I want to take away. And you make them feel that, you bring them with you. And just when they're at the point of despair, when they say, oh my God, I wish somebody could fix this problem, you say, here's how I'm going to fix this problem. Boom. So it's the number one would be make them feel the problem and come with you. So you know that's the big one. And then I'm gonna totally agree with Erin on answering the questions. Questions are not an opportunity to get your shovel out and snow people with stuff, right? I'm gonna ask you a question about this. Well, let me tell you about why you don't know what you're talking about and I know everything. I see entrepreneurs do that, and often it's an insecure place to be in front of people who are gonna ask you questions about your baby. When people ask a question, it's a really good way for you to explain how much you know about something in a really subtle way. So you know what, money and support is going to follow. Boy, does that person know what they're talking about. You can bring them with you instead of being hostile to the question. The third piece, and I'm going to steal advice from my colleague Sean Wise at the DMZ, because Sean and I sat on the DMZ intake panel for 3 years. So we heard pitches every month from people who wanted to get into the DMZ. And I was the nice guy on the panel, and Sean was the evil guy. And in fact, at one point I turned to him and I said, you're like Darth Venture, man. You're like the negative Sith Lord here. And when the next entrepreneur came in, he played the Star Wars theme on his phone. And it was really bad. I'm going to steal Sean Wise's piece. He says, sometimes you have to be prepared to hear that your baby's ugly, but nobody ever wants to hear that, right? You cradle the startup. It's what you think about. You love it. You want it to succeed. In some pitch, somebody's going to say something to you that might be true and cuts to the heart of the piece. It's a natural thing to say, oh, you got to listen to it. You can dismiss it later, but you got to be open to hearing it. So those are the three things off the top of my head, Jason, that I go for. Be prepared to hear the baby's ugly. Focus a little more on the problem, not the shiny solution, and kind of be open to the question that's going to come.
I love
Great
that.
tips.
Yeah, those are really good tips. Yeah. And this actually takes me to my next question for Fatima, which is, you know, obviously everyone is so experienced when it comes to pitching, and the clarity in which you're all presenting, it's all very clear. I feel like I'm learning a ton right now. So my next question for you, Fatima, is what was the partnership that changed your business and took it to the next level, and how did you get it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say just in my current business for Quill, the partnership that really was a game changer for us was our partnership with Spotify, which makes sense considering we're a podcasting tech-enabled agency. We actually get access to proprietary data that isn't public facing, which means we can target people who are already listening to podcasts on a very granular level based on location, age, demographic, and what other shows they're listening to. And that sort of data that isn't public facing is very instrumental in what we do and driving client success and results. I think one of the reasons that we were able to close that partnership is just sheer relentlessness and grit and hustle. I've actually worked very closely with Erin, so she will vouch for my ability to not understand what no means. And I think, you know, when it comes to pitching, a lot of the times it's sort of the same mentality. One of the pieces of advice I always give people, and it's not just when related to pitching, but very much can use it here as well, is that when it comes to being an entrepreneur and raising capital, or, you know, even being in sales, it's an emotional roller coaster where, you know, there's days you're on the top of the world, there's days you hit rock bottom, but the the commonality is that everybody is constantly facing rejection and no's, and you need to be able to not take that rejection personally. Most people understand in this industry that getting your ducks in a row takes way more work than commanding them to line up. And so my advice is always hire people or surround yourself around people who have true grit, resilience, and hustle, and don't really understand how to take that no, because I think those skills matter much more than the fancy resume with bells and whistles. And I imagine the funding isn't that different. I mean, Erin, how many no's did you get before you landed your first close? Like, I'm assuming you probably pitched hundreds of times.
All of them. So many no's.
And I think it's just about failing faster is the key, right? Like, you make your mistakes. I made so many mistakes when I was raising Quill's pre-seed friends and family round. I mean, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made was not thinking about scale, not realizing that investors want to know for every dollar that they're putting in, how are they getting that 10x, 20x, 30x return? And I was focusing on such a small market size. And then as soon as I started to change the verbiage and talk about how their 100,000 or 500,000 investment was going to come back in, $5 million or $10 million or $50 million in revenue, that's when investors really started listening. And so you have to be resilient and relentless and just keep getting back up there. So if this isn't the pitch competition that you win, there's going to be the next one and the one after that.
I love that. And that's actually, that word of grit is something that, yes, absolutely. That is such a great way to position it. And, so I know for sure that we wanted to leave as much time as possible for the mentees to ask questions, because this is such an incredible panel. We wanted to leave as much time as possible for them to ask. So if you'd like to ask a question, thank you again so much. That was so great. And I'd love to open it up now for questions from the group. So if you have any questions, please turn on your cameras and ask away.
Someone's got to have one. There's got to be questions about fundraising, rejection,
yes,
growth. Erica.
I think I have two that are coming to my mind. The first one is what are the strategies you follow to go against this fear of rejection?
I guess I can answer that first. I mean, I think you start by telling yourself it's an inevitability of building a company. I think, as Fatima said, failure is pretty synonymous with startups, and not failure of companies necessarily, but getting told no at every step, right? Whether it's from a strategic partner, from an employee, because you can't afford to pay them as much as another company, from investors. So I think just steeling yourself from day one that there's a reason not everyone is an entrepreneur, because not everyone has the ability to hear no's or to have that grit and hustle that Fatima talked about. It's never easy to hear no, but I always temper it with, they don't know as much about my industry and my business as I do. And so I chalk up a lot of the no's to a lack of understanding, or the fact that sometimes no doesn't mean no, not willful. No, I don't like your company. It means, no, I have a different investment thesis. And part of the onus, I think, is on you as the entrepreneur to do your research. You can reduce the number of no's you receive absolutely drastically by only approaching and talking to investors who are the right fit for you. For example, if I'm and I did hear many no's from folks in this category, if I'm talking to investors who only invest in B2B SaaS software, I'm a direct-to-consumer e-commerce style software company, I'm going to get a no before I've even walked in the door. And maybe they meet with me because I got a warm intro from someone who knows them and they feel obligated, but that's a no before I even walk in the door. So first, I think it's steeling yourself for the fact that you're going to get them. Second, it's getting to the why behind the no. Can you give me feedback that I can actually use to improve my pitch and to take that forward? And the third is eliminating the automatic no's before you even get in the door by understanding the thesis of the investor that you're meeting with. And that goes for strategic partners as well. They might just not have a mandate to do anything in your space or your industry. And, you can't take it personally. Their job is to say no to 99% of the people they meet with. And my favorite tweets are the ones from investors who talk about saying no to Airbnb or Twitter or Facebook or all of these big companies, because they all pass on companies that become hugely successful. So I also remind myself of that. Maybe they just passed on the next big thing. And I have this vision one day of when I sell for a lot of money of the pretty woman scene where I'm going to call them all and be like, big mistake, huge. So that's also what keeps me going, Erica. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but it is.
It is very helpful.
Erica, I will also add that, my background is in sales, which means that for every yes I've probably gotten 100 no's. And one thing that's really helped me is to approach my quotas, whatever they be, whether it's sales or funding or raising capital. I approach everything very analytically. So really figuring out what your deal flow is and how many calls do you need to have before you get one person interested in taking that meeting. Then how many meetings do you need to have for one person to, be open to reviewing your pitch deck, and work your quotas analytically and make it an algorithm that you're tracking in your CRM tools so that there's a science behind it and you're not sort of shooting in the dark. And I promise you will be able to connect the dots. So no matter what it is that you do, whether it's a year of pitching or 3 months of pitching, you will eventually land someone who believes in your vision. It just is a matter of being really analytical about it and obviously being resilient. I saw this meme recently on Instagram where it was like the life of an entrepreneur, and it was like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, hell yeah, oh crap, oh crap. And that's basically what fundraising is like.
Yeah. I don't have much to add to those 2 points. I thought that those were great. The thing I think we've got to be conscious of as entrepreneurs is our strength is our self-motivation, right? We're not getting up in the morning because there's somebody standing over our shoulder saying, go do that. We're doing it because we're motivating ourselves. But unfortunately, that's a big weakness we have, that we eat ourselves alive because we're self-motivated. Because at the end of the day, if it's not working, it's really easy for us to grab that and put it next to that self-motivation, and it becomes toxic inside us. The more conscious I think we are of that, the more I think we can do what Erin and Fatima were saying, which is you've got to separate what's going on out there from what's going on in here. And I find it very interesting that I see entrepreneurs being compassionate to each other all the time because we all understand what it's like. Very few of them extend that compassion to themselves. So I can see you pitch, Erica, and I'd be like, oh, wow, that person didn't get what you're doing. You'll get them next time, blah, blah, blah. But if I come off the stage and I feel like I screwed up, I'm going to chew myself alive. We need to be conscious that we need to be as compassionate to ourselves as we are to the people that are around us.
Ouch. Yes. Thank you very much. I'm going to let the space for others to ask questions.
Thanks, Erica. We'll get back to your other one because we'll probably have time, I'm sure. Melanie, did you have a question?
I did.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for everything that you've already shared with us. I was wondering if you could recommend how to phrase return on investment that's not going to be monetary for the investor.
Can you add a bit more context, like a social purpose, social mission initiative, or?
Absolutely. So my pitch is going to involve, like student engagement, right? And so I don't, other than saying the students will be more engaged, I'm not sure how best to phrase the benefit to the ministry or the municipality or the funding body that I'll be requesting funding from. And so that's kind of what I'm asking for recommendations with.
Alex, I feel like
I feel like this is an Alex question for sure. Erin and I are sitting here following it.
I agree with that.
I'm like, oh my God, not having to make money for an investor. This sounds like a dream.
Yeah, I see a lot of startups that are in that thing, right? Because with a lot of social ventures, their customer and their client are two different things. They're benefiting a client, but there's somebody putting up money and there's not a one-to-one piece. It's a lot easier to sell when the person buying the product is the one actually benefiting from the product. If it's a university setting, I find you can always find something to frame it in the institutional way if it's a university or a college, because those guys are competitive about students and they have a cost for student acquisition. They have a cost for retention. Their alumni departments have metrics that say for every student we get, we need to make sure they love us, because the more they love us, the more they donate for us. The harder thing is when you get into taxpayer funded school systems where there isn't any private capital. And damn it, that's where you are. Okay, that's harder. I feel the pain. You've made me feel your pain. That's awesome. It's a harder thing to do because we've got a startup right now that's doing online downloadable science kits for kids. And they've been trying to figure out how do you put that in front of school boards. And the challenge is school boards, the dirty secret about taxpayer funded education is they're not really concerned about excelling. They're concerned about ticking off boxes. And you could have the best tool in the world that boosts scores. It's a harder sell if there's no reward to the client for boosting the score. It's a hard sell if there's no a return to the person you're selling to for students being engaged. Tough one, tough one. The thing I will do, and I'll put in a plug, and then I'll stop talking. We do a session called Caffeinated Innovators every Friday, where any social entrepreneur who wants to drop in can. We have people dropping in from overseas. We save 15 minutes at the end for people who have this very question. So you get to pick people's brains who are far smarter than me who could say, hey, why don't you try that? So drop me an email off platform. I'm happy to get you an invite for Caffeinated Innovators. Goes for everybody.
Awesome, thank you.
The only other thing I'd add, Melanie, I don't know anything about that space, the educational institutions, but every investor, whether they're a grant issuer, a government, a private company, or a venture capitalist, they have people that they owe things back to, or KPIs for success, right? If it's a venture capitalist, they report back to their limited partners, the people who actually gave them money into their fund. And their only metric for success is giving a return on capital from the capital they invested in you. So the only thing they really at the end of the day care about is money. And of course, a lot of them want to say, I like the social impact ventures, but ultimately that's not what their core KPI is. Their only KPI is a return on the investment they put into your company back to their limited partners. That's probably different for grant issuers and for other folks. The challenge that you have is figuring out what is that? And maybe that's getting on the phone with someone there and saying, what are your metrics for success? And how can I frame my proposal or my pitch, or maybe even speaking to someone who works there, back channeling with someone to try to understand that. But if you can walk in and say, I have an idea that will help you achieve your driving KPIs by doing X, Y, Z, that's going to be a compelling pitch, regardless of who you're pitching to, what you're pitching, etc. I just don't know what those are. But I wish you luck.
Thank you.
How about you, Anne?
Hi, thank you so much for the panel discussion. I thought a lot of the insights were very interesting. And one in particular that was mentioned was actually pre-seed funding. And I was quite curious. So for myself personally, my startup, we're thinking of introducing refill stations for personal care products, such as your soap, shampoo, conditioner to university residences. And our major concern for us is that sort of the machinery is starting to emerge, but it's very expensive. And personally, as a university student, I don't have as much capital as I would like to sort of help self-fund this idea. So I was wondering whether or not you had any sort of recommendations on how I might be able to secure more funding. I was quite interested in the family and friends round, sort of how do you approach that, or any other options that there are.
Hey, Anne, do you have that rich uncle? Because now would be the time to hit them up.
Yeah, I wish.
That's literally what I did. I went through my black book of rich family members, called them up after years of not knowing them. And after, again, relentless pitching, I finally found one poor schmuck who was willing to hand over $100,000. And that is about all the investment raising that we have done for Quill. We actually turned that $100,000 into $1 million run rate. So it was a really good investment for them. I just didn't know it at the time because I would have asked for a better valuation. But honestly, jokes aside, I would say there's two ways that you can approach this. The first is, before you even get to friends and family round, there are a lot of government resources that you can tap into, especially now. I actually have a master spreadsheet because during Quill's early days, we were monitoring grants like nobody's business. And there's just so many that right now I know the OCE is putting out a lot of grants as well. And if you're under a particular age category, which I believe is 30, and if you're a student, even better, they have a lot of different categories where you can not only hire people and labor and support to help you grow your company, but they also give you access to grants and capital. So that would definitely be one way that I would go about it. I can actually send you this master spreadsheet of grants that I've I don't know how outdated it is because it's from last year, but I'm sure a lot of the same companies are putting out the same grants. And then, you know, of course, there's also other resources that you can tap into as well, like Futurepreneur, which is essentially a $20,000 loan given to you by the government. We also used that. You have 10 years to pay it back. In fact, with the pandemic, they've even waived all of the interest rates. So it's a really great option. I don't know if there's any terms and conditions around having to have capital before you get investment, but I don't believe there are because we weren't making money when we got access to the capital. So look at exhausting that list first before you decide to go to friends and family. But of course, if you have that rich uncle, why not?
Awesome. Thank you. And that's very kind of you. I'll definitely follow up.
And yes, I don't have a rich uncle, Anne. So I just in terms of our friends and family, Fatima's point on grants and Futurepreneur is really great. I would say for friends and family funding, it doesn't have to be big checks. So we took, I think, $5,000 from 10 or 20 people in our network. And actually the way that we heard from people that we didn't ask because we assumed they weren't the rich uncle. And we heard from them later, like, why didn't you ask me? Like, I would have put in money. I love what you're doing. And it really taught me that you don't have to go to people and say, hi, I'd like money. You can go to them and say, listen, I'm starting this company. It's a killer idea. And here's why. To Alex's point, here's the problem. Fantastic idea, by the way. Can you expand it beyond dorms? Because I think about the plastic waste of my deodorant and shampoo every single day. But that's when you can really go to them and say, just an FYI, friends and family network, we're raising funding. The minimum that we'd like you to put in is $1,000 or however much that you're looking for. I'm not sending it to you because I think you might be interested. I'm sending it to you because I don't want you to call me in 2 years and say, why didn't you ask me? And that also really positions it in a way where there's confidence that it's going to grow and it's going to be successful. I think the two things to consider with friends and family are, number one, don't take anyone's money if they're not prepared to lose it. They should be giving it to you, assuming they're setting that check on fire, and be happy that they supported you with it. My mom's an investor, Kevin's mom's an investor. I don't think they ever thought they were going to see a penny of that money back, and they still haven't, right? We might be successful from the outside, but you know, there's still a chance that they may never see that money back. And then number two, be cognizant of how many people you're adding to your cap table. Cap tables are really complex, but essentially the more investors you have on your cap table, the more difficult things get as you scale, in that there's more people that have to sign things. It just complicates things from a legal perspective. I highly recommend, as I said in the chat, the book Venture Deals by Brad Feld, which is essentially an overview of every single type of funding. And it really talks about that cap table and the importance of it. So if you're doing any kind of fundraising beyond grants or loans, I would highly recommend reading that. You can probably find it at the library, or I ordered mine on Chapters. And hopefully that's a good overview of friends and family.
All right, thank you.
The only thing I'd add to that is be as rigorous with friends and family as you are with other investors.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been asked to be part of a couple of those, and one is where someone who kind of peripherally knows you is like, hey, I need your money. The other one was very thorough. They had the prospectus, they had the pitch, the documents were all there. People get weird around money, so keeping it objective, and I like Erin's point about be clear, they're lighting their check on fire. I love that. That's actually a really good point.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne. Good luck. Sounds like a great idea, and great in your pitch deck to tie it to macro trends, right? Climate change and plastic waste. You've got such great macro trends, but frame it in your story, as Alex said.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, Jane.
Hello. Hi, Erin. Very great, stories to hear from you, and the advice. I really, really appreciate the kind of advice from here. I think, we've been kind of like on the social entrepreneur kind of like a position for a few years. So, and we are also a tech company. So definitely we're going to look for, investment and the investment, to scale up. But I kind of like wonder, is there any kind of like a difference in terms of the returns for investors to invest on social entrepreneurs versus the regular, the tech company? What will be the practical expectation about what they're looking for in terms of your growth rate, in terms of how soon they can get the return back? Thank you.
Great question, Jane. Alex, do you know the answer to this?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, I think there's a truism that says if you're going to run a social enterprise, it's not going to be as profitable or as quickly monetizable as a regular venture. It's not necessarily true, because there are people who discover niches in social return that nobody's discovered before that can be quite profitable. But, and there's always a big but, the challenge I find with social ventures is, A, the return is often monetary and social. And so you need to get people excited about the social to take often a concession on the monetary. That's not a uniform thing, but it is a general thing that you got to be conscious of. And it's how you frame the social return in a blended way with the financial return. And often that involves an appeal to patient capital, or it involves an appeal to issues that people are tired of not seeing innovation around. Like, there are traditional ways we fix social problems. Until very recently, it was throw money at charities and nonprofits. And that's how I became a social entrepreneur, because I got really frustrated with the pace of innovation in charities and nonprofits. There are other people who share that frustration, who are willing to take a concessionary return if you can actually do something new that's going to change the markers on human dignity or on inclusion or on homelessness. So it's a long way of answering the question, but there are niches in the social return piece. There are niches in the social enterprise bit that are just as profitable as regular companies, but there are more opportunities where there's a blended return, but you got to be able to sell the blend.
I see. Great. Thank you so much for that. And also a kind of a follow-up for that. Do you know some kind of successful stories for the social kind of startups?
Yeah, a lot. If you check out Ryerson/SVZ, I'll put it in the chat window. But we have profiles of the 35 different startups we have right now. And one I'd suggest to check in on, it's one of our alumni. I haven't talked to them in a while, but they were doing quite well the last time I saw them. They're a good example of people who discovered a niche that is very lucrative, but it's something that people hadn't thought to monetize before. And it's the idea of supply chain transparency. We need more transparency around global supply chains, because there's a lot of slavery, a lot of human rights abuse, a lot of environmental problems, except how do you pay for that? And what they've figured out is there's a huge hidden cost to business around supply chain lawsuits, that if you can lift that supply chain and show people where the problems are, it reduces their insurance cost. And the insurance cost to Canadian companies every year is $11 billion in settled supply chain claims. The minute you have that number, you can do a calculation with a VC that says, my software can help corporations save $11 billion. Can we connect those two dots? Now you've got a lucrative new niche, right? But I'll put it in the chat window. But I'd love to hear what Fatima and Erin have to say on this.
Jane, I was recently reading an article, and I can't remember, I don't know too much about this company, but I think they're called Good and Well, and they're a VC company in Toronto that specifically focus on social impacting and impact investing. Beyond that, like Erin said, not making money for investors is not an area that I specialize in. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that their company focuses exclusively on social impact investing. And so, I mean, that's comforting to know that there are VCs that are, strictly focused on pitches like yours. And so I would definitely check them out if you haven't heard of them.
All right, great. Yeah. Thank you.
I just added a note to the chat. Jane, shoot me a note and I'll forward it to Good and Well, because I know their team, and they're, to Fatima's point, they invest in social impact. I think the short answer, though, is if you're going to a traditional VC, again, their economic engine does not allow for anything except return on investment to their LPs. So unless they're a very different type of VC firm, I haven't come across one, they want the same thing, which is they want to know that you can be $100 million plus business, and their model relies on their successful companies becoming unicorns. So my advice would be talk to angel investors. They are much more driven by their personal ethics, and they'll invest money in a company if they don't see a financial outcome just because they care about the cause. And they're much more patient with their return on investment and how big that might be. So when we pitch to angels, they're typically looking for 3 to 5 times return in 3 to 5 years. But those might not be the same parameters that social impact driven angels have. They might say, I don't care if I ever get my money back. I'm rich. That's why I'm an angel investor. And I would like to put money into people who are solving problems in our society. And the only return on my investment is knowing that I'm contributing something positive to the world. I know there have to be people out there like that, but I'm going to be honest, I don't know if they're working at VC firms. So I will keep you posted if I find them though.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it so much for all the great advice from you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jane. Good luck.
Thank you.
Melanie.
Hi, I'm back again. Another question. Lately, I've been doing a lot of meetings with people who should be clients, and I'm getting scared that at the end of the meeting, they're saying, oh, that's great. You're going to be our go-to person. But I get the impression that they think I'm going to keep working for free. So really what I'm asking is, how do I then tactfully say, and who is the signing authority to whom I should speak next? How do I turn that meeting into a business relationship as opposed to like this, sort of advisory capacity?
I mean, Fatima, you probably have a ton of advice here, but I used to get this all the time. When we were running a marketing agency together, we would get folks all the time who were essentially just looking to get our advice for free. And it was introducing budget and the conversation about that into the very first interaction. So we actually developed an onboarding survey that had the question in first contact, what is your budget for this project? We typically work with clients on projects about $10,000 and higher. So that set the expectation every time we interacted with a potential client to put budget into their head from the start. Now that's not going to be the same as the process that you'd undertake, but if you're meeting with someone, and give that in your elevator pitch, right? When they say, oh, tell me more about your venture, say, this is what we're doing. Typically we work with, people on a project basis. Our projects range from X, Y, and Z. We also do some consulting, and I'm happy to discuss that if that would be more interesting to you. Then you've said it in your intro, and there's no miscommunication that you're working for them for free. And the way that you said it, who would I speak to that would have signing authority to sign off on the budget? Say it exactly like you said it. You said it perfectly there. That wasn't rude. It was straightforward. It was very clear that this was going to escalate the relationship to a paid one. I mean, I don't know, Fatima, you're the salesperson here, but it sounded pretty good to me.
It sounds great. That's great advice, Erin. My favorite quote, and it's from The Dark Knight. I'm not even sorry. This is from the Joker's mouth. He says, if you're good at something, never do it for free. And that is my mantra and everything. And not to say that I don't believe in giving back to the community, but I find that when you either discount your services or you offer to do a bunch of spec work for free, to Erin's point, you're devaluing your brand. And so being very upfront right from the beginning that, what you will do, like whether it's a 30-minute consultation within a particular parameter of what you are willing to give your time to, and anything outside of that has to be paid. And it's just about not devaluing your brand. And honestly, you may be a one-person shop, but the person you're talking to doesn't know that. So you can always blame it on our finance team has put this policy in place. And always, you can get creative as well. I mean, we can, we'll charge you $500 for spec work, but then it can go towards the actual project when you do decide to sign on. There's ways that you can get creative, but do not discount your services and do not devalue your brand by doing anything for free, because like the Joker said, if you're good at something, never do it for free. Remember that. Drops
I
mic.
love that. I am so going to steal that. That is so good. The only thing I'd add to that is, I think you also have to be conscious of who's more likely to ask for things for free. Everybody does, but in my experience, it's often the people who don't have value over their time or whose bills get paid anyway. And by that, it's kind of government and agencies and educational institutions. And I know that's the market you're selling in. I can't tell you the number of meetings we've had where they've like, oh, well, we can have 3 or 4 meetings about this and then we'll make a decision. I'm like, no, your bills are getting paid, ours aren't. So happy to talk to you about these things within the parameter. I love the way you're framing it.
Yeah,
Who's got authority to
Alex,
sign off on this?
they're called the tire kickers, and they're honestly in every industry.
Yeah.
The time wasters and the tire kickers.
Yeah, I find the public sector is often a little worse with it because they don't have a value on the time. That's just my personal experience.
Thank you.
And Melanie, I just wanted to also say one more thing to that. I often find that the respect that you get when you are firm and clear and direct about your boundaries and what you are and aren't willing to do, oftentimes, like, you know, sometimes it's still really difficult for me to be like, nope, that's spec work. Unfortunately, we can't do that at a discounted price, and that's a company policy. I find that the company or the person on the receiving end actually want to work with us so much more. It's that desirability factor, which you want what you can't have, and they respect you that much more for almost, you know, having your principles when it comes to and knowing what your brand is worth. So it actually will benefit you in the long run if you get into the habit of positioning yourself like that.
Awesome. Thank you.
We did have a question from Erica a while ago I don't want to forget about, which was how do I start approaching investors and when is the best time? So maybe I can tackle that if that's okay, Jason, and then pass it over to the other panelists. So in terms of when to start approaching investors, you know, they always say the best time to invest in Apple was 1980. The next best time is today. It's kind of like building relationships with investors. It's very relationship based. And the sooner you start building those relationships, the stronger they'll be when you need them. The one thing I would say though, is that if you're in just launching your company and you're looking for an angel investor and you're building relationships exclusively with venture capital firms that invest in Series C and later deals, you're spending your time on building relationships with the wrong people. So I would focus on building relationships with the folks who you know you're going to be asking for money from in 6, 9, 12 months. And then as your company moves through its life cycle, you're continually changing that relationship building focus to the next stage. So for Willful, we're very focused on building relationships with Series A investors because we completed our seed round last spring. And before that, it was the opposite. It was building with seed stage. And every time someone from a larger firm would contact us, we would say, thank you so much. We'd love to stay in your CRM. We're not ready at the stage. We're not anywhere close to the stage where we would be ready for you to invest in us, but please reach out in 6 to 12 months, or I'll reach back out when we're ready to re-engage you. And I think the hardest thing as an entrepreneur is you're going to get bombarded with emails from investors because, to Fatima's point, they're salespeople themselves. They're trying to get a certain number of deals into the top of their pipeline. So the hardest thing to do as an entrepreneur is to say no to an investor. But by saying no to the investors who are at the wrong stage, in the wrong location, you know, if they say on their website they invest in B2B software, I'm not meeting with them unless I ask them, hey, can you name a couple direct to consumer investments you've made lately, or tell me how the thesis that you've outlined on your website has changed, and they can actually give me a good answer. So don't waste your time on meeting with late stage investors, but definitely spend time and prioritize building relationships with investors from day one of having an idea.
I think that's a big question for me, because it's like, how it's the first approach, or how did you do the first approach, for instance?
It's a good question.
How does it look like?
Sometimes it's meeting people at events, virtual or otherwise. You know, I wasn't reaching out for formal pitches. You know, it was more so I attended a lot of events and just shook hands. I got a lot of introductions to people just for informal coffee chats. And then when there were meetings that were more about, you know, going through a pitch deck, that was different. That was more getting introductions from people in my network so that I had, and I made a list, right? I made a list of every investor that I thought was the right fit for us at our seed stage. And then I tried to find people in my network who could facilitate warm introductions. But to your point, in the early stages, it's not a pitch meeting. It's a conversation. Hey, I'm Erica. I'm building this. You know, I know that you invested. We're way too early for you, but would you be okay if I added you to our monthly or quarterly update for followers. I'd love to keep you in the loop. Every single investor I've spoken to has said yes to that, because to Fatima's point, they don't want to lose out on the next big investment, and they want to keep you in their pipeline so they can report back to their boss that, oh, I have Willful's in my pipeline and we're keeping an eye on them. So if anything, it's be casual. Tell them what you're working on. Tell them you know you're too early. Ask if you can add them to your email list, and then take the time and be diligent about every month or every quarter, just sending a short update. Hey, we met here. Here's a reminder of what we do. Here's some highlights from the past few months. We're still not raising, but we're excited to keep you in the loop on what we're doing. Until next time, include some asks, etc. But that's the best way to curate that list of potential investors over time and to keep them warm. At least in my experience.
I actually have to hop off in a minute. Sorry about that, but I just wanted to add one more thing to that. And that is, when I was raising capital during the early stages of Quill, we were right at ideation at that point. I noticed that just like through networking events, I was getting a lot of VCs approaching me and asking to, have conversations. And I was really confused because we were at ideation, a small company, just me and my business partner, and like these really big VC companies wanting to talk to me. It just didn't really add up. And after about the 6th or 7th conversation with a VC company and the 6th or 7th no, where they'd have the initial call, ask me to send a pitch deck, and then I'd never hear from them again, made me realize that they have their quotas to fill, especially if you're a woman or a person of color. And so a lot of times it's about deal flow and just making sure that you're doing your due diligence by having conversations with those people, so you can go back to your extended team and say, look, I spoke to X amount of people and they weren't the right fit. But so it's, to Erin's point, it's about doing your homework and your due diligence and making sure that time is our most valuable resource. It's so precious. And so making sure that you're only giving people the time of the day when it makes sense and it's a clear alignment with what you're doing, and it can actually translate into a second or third conversation. With that said, it was such a pleasure meeting everyone virtually. Feel free to connect with me. My email is fatima@quillit.io. You can reach me on my website. I'm on all of the social platforms except for TikTok. And Alex, it was a pleasure to meet you, and Erin, I'm sure we'll talk in the next hour. Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thank you so much. And thank you for, man, this was like a masterclass. I learned so much. So I'm ready to launch my business now. I'm thrilled. I'm so thrilled. But thank you again, Alex, Fatima, Erin. Incredible insights. And thank you everyone for joining. And I'm now going to pass it on to Angie, because Angie is going to be talking about what is coming up next for all of you as you continue your journey. But thank you again, everyone.
Thanks everyone for having us today. Appreciate it.
Really interesting chat. Looking forward to seeing where people go. Great to meet you guys.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Alex. Wow, I agree with Jason. Complete masterclass. And undoubtedly your advice, these nuggets of information, your experiences will definitely help our mentees prepare to be, future climate leaders, and also prepare for that, for the pitch competition to win $20,000. And I'm sure their paths will cross with you as well. So thanks again. Excellent. Jason, you, just a big thank you. Your presentation, your 101, was a story in itself, and definitely demonstrated that you are one of the best storytellers that I know and that the city has. I just want to thank Daniela, my colleague who has helped create and help co-curate all these knowledge labs. Councillor McKelvey, who is a champion and a relentless advocate for climate at the City of Toronto. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to thank our other champion, our CFO and Treasurer of the City of Toronto, Heather Taylor, who will close us off with a few words for everyone.
I found my mute button. So, and I just want to echo Angie's thanks to Alex and Jason and Erin and Fatima, who's dropped off the call. But you guys were amazing, and there were some points that I hope really resonated
with the mentees. The fact is it is about telling a story, not only about your business opportunity, but yourself. And, there were a couple of points that you put in that you made an emphasis on, and it was, to be genuine, to be authentic, and to be inspirational. And as much as each of these individuals need to find their inspiration, they need to inspire the investors. They need to inspire the stakeholders that are going to pay attention to them. So for those of you who were taking notes on a pitch, the key here is not only to sell your idea, but to sell yourself by being authentic. And I can't say that enough. Alex, you also made a comment about, I think it was you and Erin actually were talking about trying to weave in and anticipate where there are potential hurdles or where there are questions. And I can tell you, being on the civil service side of the city, we try and anticipate where all the questions are going to be posed to us. And, we just presented almost a $12.5 billion budget, and we call it wargaming. And we go through and we try and anticipate every single possible question. And we do that by practicing with different stakeholders so that they're coming in with fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. And what we try and do is, as we're talking, we try and get out ahead, with whether that's a breadcrumb or whether that's an actual stop it in its tracks concern. And so I can't emphasize how important that is trying to anticipate what people are going to ask, what is their interest, how are you going to inspire them to learn more about you. So hopefully that's a couple of nuggets for you guys to take away and build into your plans. I'm super excited. I've been following this journey. I can't wait to see the pitches. And I really hope that each of you are excited and nervous and, keeping us on the edge of our seats. And I hope you're on the edge of your seats too. So good luck from all of us. And thank you again, Jason and Alex and Erin, if you're still with us. But I hope everyone has a fantastic evening.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Jason, 1 second.
Yes.
For everybody. I'd also like to thank, obviously, Chantel and Dustin, but I also want to thank you because you have a little gift for our mentees that...
Yes. So we do a lot of great, so we have a membership program at Toronto Life. It's called Toronto Life Insider. And we do a lot of basically workshops about stuff like this. So we do brand strategy, marketing, helping build your business. Our next one is called There's No Such Thing as Digital. And basically it's about the future of marketing innovation, everything from virtual reality to Zoom events like this. So you're all being offered complimentary memberships. You're going to send it to you. It's in there in the chat. Thank you, Dustin, killing it again. It's in the chat. To sign up, just use that password and you'll get your complimentary membership for TL Insider, and you can participate in a lot of great upcoming workshops about everything that you need to help you build your business. So looking forward to seeing you at some of our future events. We're actually going to be, as a starting point, if you sign up right away, one of our next fireside chats is going to be with Michelle Romano. So if you want to hear about the future of entrepreneurship in Canada, that's going to be a great one. So sign up for that event. It's going to be super fun. But thank you so much again.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, Toronto Life. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.